Let's begin with the first and perhaps most subtle of the 5 enemies of progress: indifference. It doesn't roar like failure or strike like fear. It creeps in quietly, disguised as peace, disguised as balance, disguised as, I'm fine the way things are. And that's what makes it so dangerous. You see, failure at least has movement in it. You tried, you acted, and maybe you stumbled. But indifference has no movement at all. It's the quiet settling of the soul into comfort. Jim Rohn used to say, the most tragic thing is not that people aim too high and miss. It's that they aim too low and hit. That's the essence of indifference. It's what happens when you stop caring deeply about improvement, when you let your potential sit in the corner collecting dust because the couch feels more comfortable. Progress requires energy. It requires awareness. But indifference drains both. It whispers, why bother? And convinces you that average is safe. Let me tell you something about human nature. We are designed for movement. When a person stops striving, stops learning, stops reaching, the spirit begins to decay. Not visibly at first, but slowly dreams lose their color, goals lose their urgency, and soon the fire goes out. Indifference is the quiet killer of the extraordinary. It doesn't destroy all at once. It erodes your hunger, one small compromise at a time. Think about this. Every great achievement in human history began with someone who cared deeply. The Wright brothers cared about flying. Edison cared about light. Mandela cared about freedom. Caring is the foundation of progress. So when indifference sets in, it's not just an emotional state. It's a philosophical surrender. You are saying, I no longer care enough to change my condition. And the moment that happens, growth stops. The world doesn't owe you progress. Progress is voluntary. It's something you must sign up for every single day. Most people think the opposite of progress is failure, but it's not. The opposite of progress is apathy, because failure can teach, pain can instruct, but indifference, it teaches nothing. It numbs you to opportunity. It makes you believe that tomorrow will look like today, and that's perfectly fine. But it's not fine. Life is not meant to be endured, it's meant to be lived deliberately. Indifference feeds on routine. You wake up, you do what's necessary, you go back to sleep, and little by little, your spark fades. The danger is that you can be productive and still indifferent. You can be busy and still stagnant. You can be surrounded by people, but isolated from your own ambition. Indifference isn't about laziness, it's about the absence of emotional engagement with your own potential. So how do you defeat it? You begin by caring again, intentionally. Care about your time, care about your growth. Care about becoming more valuable, not because someone's watching, but because excellence is its own reward. Jim Rohn would remind us, the sign of maturity is taking responsibility for your own emotions. That means deciding that you will no longer drift through life on autopilot. Reignite your curiosity. Ask yourself, what could I become if I truly cared? That question alone can begin to crack the shell of indifference. Because once you start caring, you start seeing opportunities, connections, directions you couldn't see before. Caring is the light that guides awareness, and awareness in turn fuels progress. But you must also protect that spark. The world around you is full of distractions designed to keep you comfortably numb. Endless entertainment, endless scrolling, endless noise. The modern world rewards distraction more than dedication. So caring, truly caring, has become a radical act. It takes courage to stay awake in a world that profits from your sleep. Indifference is not defeated in a single decision. It's overcome in moments. Every time you choose purpose over passivity, meaning over comfort, focus over noise, it's choosing to ask, how can I improve? Instead of saying, it's good enough, it's deciding that your life will not be a slow decline into safety, but a bold climb towards significance. And when you start to care deeply again, life responds. Doors open. Energy returns. You begin to see that progress isn't a privilege, it's a consequence. A consequence of caring enough to act every single day. So if you find yourself numb, uninspired, or detached, don't wait for a miracle. Start small. Pick one thing that matters and throw yourself into it. Care so much that indifference has no room left to breathe. Because here's the truth. Progress doesn't belong to the intelligent or the lucky. It belongs to the ones who care the most. Indifference is the enemy of progress, and caring, truly caring, is the beginning of everything great. The second great enemy of progress is doubt. That quiet, persuasive voice in the back of your mind that says, maybe you're not ready. It's the voice that questions your potential before you've even begun. And the most dangerous thing about doubt is that it sounds reasonable. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It presents itself as logic, as caution, as being realistic. But underneath all of that lies fear, the fear of disappointment, of rejection, of not being enough. Jim Rohn once said, doubt is like a disease. It will infect your attitude, your effort, and your results if you don't fight it early. And he was right. Doubt doesn't destroy your abilities. It destroys your belief in them. You can have all the talent, all the intelligence, all the opportunity in the world, but if you doubt yourself long enough, you'll never use any of it. It paralyzes you before you even take the first step. You see, progress doesn't demand perfection. It demands participation. But doubt convinces you to wait until you're certain, until you're ready, until everything aligns. And here's the truth. You will never feel ready. Readiness is not an emotion, it's a decision. The confident person is not the one without doubt. It's the one who moves forward despite it. Think about it. Every person who's ever achieved something extraordinary began in uncertainty. Edison didn't know his 1000th experiment would work. Steve Jobs didn't know the world would accept a computer that fit in your pocket. They moved because they believed a possibility was more powerful than certainty. And that's the mindset doubt tries to kill. When you doubt yourself, you don't just hesitate. You send a signal to your mind that failure is inevitable. And once that belief takes root, it begins to shape your behavior. You take smaller risks. You lower your expectations. You start protecting yourself instead of expressing yourself. And before long, you stop growing altogether. Doubt becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The psychology behind this is simple. The brain seeks evidence to confirm what it already believes. If you believe you can't, your mind will find reasons you shouldn't even try. But if you choose to believe you can, your brain will begin searching for solutions. That's why Jim Rohn taught that belief is the starting point of achievement. The moment you begin to doubt your worth, your capacity, your destiny, progress stops. But here's what most people misunderstand. Doubt isn't always bad. In small doses, it can be a tool. Healthy doubt asks, how can I do this better? Unhealthy doubt asks, can I do this at all? One fuels preparation, the other fuels paralysis. The key is to recognize which kind you're feeding. You fight doubt the same way you fight darkness. Not by arguing with it, but by turning on the light. That light is evidence. Remind yourself of what you've already overcome. Write down your wins, your progress, your strengths. Confidence isn't arrogance, it's memory. The memory of the times you proved yourself capable. When you collect enough proof, doubt loses its power. Another way to defeat doubt is through environment. If you surround yourself with people who constantly question your vision, your belief will shrink to match theirs. But when you walk with people of faith, of discipline, of progress, your belief begins to grow. That's why Rohn said, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If you spend your time with doubters, you'll inherit their limitations. If you spend your time with doers, you'll inherit their momentum. You must also learn to act quickly when inspiration strikes. The longer you wait, the louder doubt becomes. Action is the antidote. Doubt grows in the silence of hesitation, but it starves in the presence of movement. When you act even imperfectly, you build momentum, and momentum creates evidence. And that evidence begins to whisper something new. Maybe I can do this. Say, remember? Belief is not about pretending, it's about choosing. You choose to trust yourself, to trust the process, to trust that growth is possible even when outcomes are uncertain. Every great success story begins with someone who refused to let doubt have the final word. So when that voice whispers, who do you think you are? Answer it. Say, I'm someone who's willing to try. Because that's all progress needs. A willing mind, a believing heart, and a consistent hand. You don't have to eliminate doubt, you just have to outwork it. Doubt will always be there, waiting for you to pause long enough to listen. But if you keep moving, it can't catch up. Because at the end of the day, progress belongs to those who act while others hesitate, who believe while others question, and who build while others wait for certainty. Doubt may whisper, but action shouts louder. Choose to believe and let your belief make you unstoppable. The third enemy of progress is fear, the great paralyzer of human potential. It's one of the oldest, deepest emotions in our psychological fabric. It's the invisible wall that stands between who we are and who we could be. Every person who has ever attempted something meaningful has met fear at the gate. And here's the truth, most people stop there. Not because they lack ability, but because fear convinces them to. Jim Rohn once said, we must all suffer one of 2 pains, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. Fear is what drives most people toward the second. It's not the fear of danger that stops us. It's the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, the fear of looking foolish. And those are not physical fears, they're psychological. They exist entirely in the imagination, yet they have the power to shape our reality. Fear begins as a whisper, what if it doesn't work? And soon becomes a story. It won't work, and you'll look stupid for trying. It's remarkable how creative the mind can be when inventing reasons not to act. You start to visualize every possible mistake, every potential embarrassment until inaction feels like safety. But that safety is an illusion. Because while you're standing still, time is moving forward. Opportunities pass, and potential dies quietly in the shadow of fear. The truth is fear never disappears, it evolves. You overcome one, and another shows up dressed in new clothes. You can't destroy it, but you can dominate it. Courage, as Jim Rohn taught, isn't the absence of fear, it's acting in spite of it. The difference between those who achieve And those who only dream isn't that one group is fearless. It's that they learn to walk through the fire anyway. Let's get philosophical for a moment. Fear is rooted in attachment. Our attachment to comfort, control, reputation, and certainty. When we let go of those attachments, fear loses its grip. Because what can fear threaten if you've already accepted that growth requires risk? You must understand this: security and progress do not coexist. Every time you choose progress, you choose uncertainty. And every time you choose uncertainty, you awaken fear. The goal isn't to silence fear, but to move forward while it screams. Fear also thrives on inaction. It feeds on hesitation. The longer you wait, the stronger it grows. Have you ever noticed that the moment you finally take the first step, fear begins to shrink? That's because fear cannot survive in the presence of momentum. Movement is medicine. It's the antidote to anxiety. When you start doing, your brain shifts from imagination to engagement, from what might happen to what is happening. And reality is never as terrifying as imagination. Rohn often said, "Discipline weighs ounces, regret weighs tons." Think about that. Every time you avoid fear, you're not escaping it. You're trading it for a heavier one later. The fear of trying becomes the regret of never knowing. And regret is the one emotion that grows with time. 10 years from now, the thing you feared won't matter, but the chance you didn't take will still haunt you. You can't wait for courage to arrive, you must generate it. Courage is built like muscle, through resistance. Each time you confront fear, even in small ways, you grow stronger. Speak when you'd rather stay silent. Start when you'd rather wait. Take the risk when your mind says, "Not yet." Every act of bravery redefines who you are to yourself. There's also a practical side to managing fear. Break big goals into smaller steps. The mind fears what it cannot measure. When you reduce the unknown into manageable parts, fear becomes less mystical and more mathematical. You can plan for it, prepare for it, work through it. Action converts uncertainty into data, and data destroys fear's imagination. But perhaps the most profound way to overcome fear is through purpose. When your why becomes powerful enough, fear becomes irrelevant. A parent will run into a burning building for their child, not because they're fearless, but because purpose has overpowered self-preservation. Likewise, when your mission matters deeply to you, when you have a reason to grow, to build, to contribute, fear will still appear, but it will no longer control you. In life, you don't get to choose whether or not you'll feel fear. You only get to choose whether you'll be ruled by it. You can either live confined by imaginary boundaries or expand through them. And here's the paradox. When you face fear often enough, it begins to respect you. The unknown becomes familiar. You develop a quiet confidence that says, "I've been here before and I know I can handle it." That's real progress. Not the absence of fear, but mastery over it. So don't wait for fear to vanish before you begin. It won't. Start while you're scared. Act while your voice shakes. Move while your legs tremble. Because once you do, you'll realize fear was never the enemy. Stagnation was. Fear simply pointed to the place where you were meant to grow. Fear is not a signal to stop. It's a sign you're standing at the edge of progress. Step forward anyway. The fourth enemy of progress is excuses, that clever voice of self-justification that disguises itself as logic, reason, or circumstance. If fear stops you from acting, excuses make you feel good about not acting. They're the comfortable lies we tell ourselves to avoid the discomfort of growth. And the dangerous part is they sound intelligent. They make you believe that you're being practical, that you're simply waiting for the right time. But there is no right time. There's only now. Jim Rohn said, "If you really want something, you'll find a way. If you don't, you'll find an excuse." It's one of his simplest statements, but it cuts straight to the heart of human behavior. Excuses are emotional armor. They protect the ego from the pain of responsibility. Because as long as you have a good excuse, you don't have to admit that you could have done more. It's a psychological shield against failure, and that's exactly what makes it the enemy of progress. Excuses come in many forms. I don't have the time. I don't have the resources. I'm too old. It's not the right moment. Each one sounds reasonable, but together they form a prison. A comfortable, invisible prison built from words. And every time you repeat one, the walls grow thicker. You start to believe your own story, and once that happens, you're no longer being held back by reality. You're being held back by your narrative. Here's the truth. The world is full of people with less opportunity, fewer resources, more challenges, and yet they progress. Why? Because progress doesn't come from ideal conditions. It comes from inner decision. Jim Rohn used to emphasize, "Don't wish it were easier, wish you were better." That's the mindset that kills excuses. Instead of focusing on the obstacle, you focus on your capacity to overcome it. You stop negotiating with limitations and start strengthening your abilities. There's also a psychological principle at play here called self-handicapping. It means when people fear failure, they create excuses ahead of time. So if they don't succeed, they can blame the circumstance instead of themselves. I didn't study because I was tired. I didn't start because I didn't have enough support. The mind creates a backup plan for failure to protect self-esteem. But the cost is enormous. It prevents growth. Because to grow, you must risk taking full responsibility for your results. Responsibility is freedom. Excuses are chains. When you stop blaming, you start building. When you stop rationalizing, you start realizing. That's the psychological shift that separates the achievers from the dreamers. One group looks outward, blaming the economy, the boss, the government, the timing. The other looks inward, asking, what can I do differently? The first group waits for conditions to change. The second group changes their condition. Excuses also thrive in the company of complainers. Spend enough time around people who justify mediocrity, and soon you'll start doing the same. Environment feeds belief. If everyone around you normalizes blaming circumstances, progress will always feel optional. But if you spend time with people who take ownership, people who say, it's on me, their mindset rubs off on you. Responsibility becomes your reflex and excuses begin to sound foreign. There's another hidden cost to excuses. They destroy credibility with yourself. Every time you make an excuse and believe it, you weaken self-trust. You tell your mind, it's okay to lie to myself if it keeps me comfortable. Over time, you stop believing your own commitments. You set goals, but deep down, you know you'll find a reason to quit when it gets hard. That's how mediocrity takes hold, not through lack of effort, but through lack of honesty. The antidote to excuses is truth, radical truth, the kind that stings a little when you first admit it. I didn't follow through. I procrastinated. I was afraid. When you own those statements without defending them, something powerful happens. You reclaim control. Because what you take responsibility for, you can change. What you blame, you remain bound to. Jim Rohn often said, don't join the easy crowd. Go where the expectations are high. Why? Because high expectations leave no room for excuses. They force you to stretch, to adapt, to rise. The easy crowd makes it simple to justify staying the same. The high expectation crowd reminds you that you're capable of more. If you catch yourself making excuses, stop and ask one question. What's the truth beneath this story? Maybe the truth is that you're scared, unprepared, or uncertain, and that's fine. Growth begins with honesty, not perfection. But don't decorate your fears with logic and call them reasons. Call them what they are. Barriers you can overcome once you face them. Progress requires responsibility. You can't outsource it, delegate it, or disguise it. The moment you decide that your results are your responsibility, everything changes. You start finding ways, not reasons. You start asking how, not why not. Excuses will always be available. They're free, they're popular, and they sound convincing. But they'll cost you the one thing that truly matters: progress. Excuses make today easy, but tomorrow empty. Responsibility makes today hard, but tomorrow full. Choose responsibility and leave excuses behind. The fifth enemy of progress is laziness. And not just the kind where you lie on the couch doing nothing, but the deeper kind, the quiet form that disguises itself as comfort, procrastination, or endless planning. It's the slow death of potential, the quiet decay of dreams. Jim Rohn called it the subtle disease of drifting, because laziness rarely announces itself. It doesn't say, I'm stopping you from succeeding. It says, relax, you've got time. And that's how it wins. Most people don't fail in one dramatic moment. They fail gradually, by surrendering small moments of effort, by trading meaningful action for temporary ease. They say, I'll start tomorrow. But tomorrow becomes next week, next month, next year. And before they know it, time has taken its toll. Rohn used to remind us, we must all suffer one of two pains, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. Laziness chooses the second one every time. There's a misconception about laziness, that it's the absence of motivation, but often it's the avoidance of discomfort. The brain naturally seeks pleasure and avoids pain. So when progress demands effort, focus, or risk, the lazy mind quickly finds a distraction: television, gossip, scrolling, sleep, anything that provides temporary satisfaction. But what laziness doesn't understand is that comfort today creates pain tomorrow. Comfort is never free. It always collects its payment later, usually in the form of regret. Jim Rohn often said, you can't hire someone else to do your push-ups for you. That's the perfect metaphor for life. No one can read for you, exercise for you, build your discipline for you. Progress is non-transferable. And laziness thrives on the illusion that you can somehow skip the process and still enjoy the result. But you can't cheat the law of effort. You can only delay the reward. Psychologically, laziness often hides behind justification. I'm tired. I deserve a break. I work better under pressure. Sound familiar? These are the mind's defense mechanisms. Clever little stories that make an action feel rational. But here's what Rohn taught: the same energy used to make an excuse could have been used to make a start. It takes energy to be lazy, the energy of avoidance, denial, and guilt. The only difference is that productive energy compounds while lazy energy decays. Another thing to understand is that laziness isn't just physical. It's mental and spiritual. Mental laziness shows up when we stop thinking deeply, stop reading, stop challenging our beliefs. Spiritual laziness appears when we stop reflecting, stop caring about purpose, stop striving for meaning. The body follows the mind. If the mind grows dull, so does ambition. That's why Rohn emphasized personal development. He said, work harder on yourself than you do on your job, because when you're mentally sharp, laziness loses its grip. Let's look at the psychology behind effort. Every time you push yourself beyond comfort, you trigger a small internal resistance, that voice that says, why bother? But when you ignore that voice and act anyway, your brain releases chemicals that reinforce action, dopamine, serotonin, endorphins. Over time, this rewires your habits. Discipline starts to feel rewarding, not punishing. That's the hidden secret. Action creates energy, not the other way around. You don't act because you feel motivated because you act. Laziness is also fueled by lack of direction. A person without goals has no reason to move. Progress requires a target. When you don't know what you want, any effort feels meaningless. That's why clarity is the enemy of laziness. Once you have a clear purpose, it becomes harder to waste time. Purpose energizes the spirit. It gives meaning to discipline. Without it, laziness will always win, because effort without direction feels like struggle, but effort toward a goal feels like progress. Another cause of laziness is perfectionism. Strange as it sounds, many people don't start because they fear doing something imperfectly. They'd rather wait for ideal conditions. But perfectionism is just fear in disguise. Fear that you'll fail, fear that you'll be judged. True progress begins when you give yourself permission to start messy, to learn as you go. Action refines ability. Waiting perfects nothing. The cure is not guilt or shame, it's structure. Create routines that remove decision fatigue. Set small, specific goals that generate quick wins. The brain loves progress, and progress, even in small doses, creates momentum. Rohn said, success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. It's the daily habits that build extraordinary lives. Lazy people wait for big bursts of inspiration. Disciplined people rely on small, consistent effort. And remember, this laziness isn't rest. Rest is strategic recovery. It restores your energy for greater productivity. Laziness drains it. Rest feels good after effort. Laziness feels comfortable instead of effort. The difference is purpose. If you've earned your rest, it rejuvenates you. If you avoid your work, it numbs you. In the end, laziness is not about doing nothing. It's about doing less than you're capable of. It's choosing the easy path over the meaningful one. And every time you do, you chip away at your potential until one day you look back and realize that your dreams didn't die. They were simply neglected. You were born to move, to grow, to build. The human spirit was not designed for stagnation. When you push yourself, when you discipline your mind and body, you rediscover the power that comfort tried to hide. Laziness is the slowest form of suicide. Effort is the only cure. Choose effort, and life will reward you with progress, strength, and pride. Awareness. That's the quiet strength most people underestimate. It's not loud, not glamorous, not the kind of trait that gets celebrated in movies or headlines. But in real life, awareness is everything. It's the light that exposes the 5 enemies of progress before they can take root. Because the truth is, you can't fight what you don't see. You can't correct what you don't recognize. Awareness is the moment you wake up from unconscious living and realize, I've been drifting, not driving. Jim Rohn taught that life is designed to be lived intentionally. Don't just go through the day, he said. Get from the day. But most people do just the opposite. They go through the day, through the motions, through the weeks and months, rarely pausing to ask, where am I headed? Who am I becoming? What's shaping my behavior? Without awareness, the enemies of progress, indifference, doubt, fear, excuses, laziness, operate freely, quietly, undetected. They don't need to destroy your life dramatically, they just need you not to notice. Awareness begins with observation, seeing yourself clearly without judgment. It's the discipline of watching your own thoughts, habits, and choices with curiosity rather than criticism. Why do I react this way? Why am I avoiding that task? Why do I keep saying yes when I mean no? Those questions are powerful. They turn autopilot into authorship. They move you from being a passive participant in life to an active designer of it. Rohn would often say, you cannot change the seasons, but you can change yourself. That's awareness in motion, recognizing that while circumstances may not be in your control, your responses always are. Awareness is the starting line of transformation. It's not change itself, but it's what makes change possible. Because the unaware person repeats patterns, the aware person revises them. Philosophically, awareness is consciousness turned inward, the capacity to witness your own life unfolding, and that witnessing brings power. Most people think discipline starts with effort, but it really starts with awareness. Before you can act differently, you must see differently. Awareness is the bridge between understanding and action. Let's get practical. Awareness is built through reflection, not distraction, not business, reflection. Take time each day to review. Ask, what worked today? What didn't? Where did I give in to fear or laziness? The moment you ask, you shine a light on behavior that was previously in the dark. Over time, patterns reveal themselves. You begin to see the mechanics of your own mind, where it helps you and where it sabotages you. In psychology, there's a concept called metacognition, thinking about your thinking. It's the awareness of awareness. When you cultivate this, you begin to notice not only what you think, but how you think. You catch yourself in the act, when you're making an excuse, when you're doubting, when you're hesitating out of fear. That's power. Because once you see the mechanism, you can interrupt it. You can choose differently. Jim Rohn would sometimes tell audiences, don't wish for less problems, wish for more skills. Awareness is one of those skills. It teaches you to step back, to gain perspective before reacting. It gives you a moment of pause between impulse and decision. And in that pause lies freedom. The freedom to respond with intention rather than emotion. Another way to cultivate awareness is through journaling. Write your thoughts. Record your experiences. When you put your inner world on paper, you externalize it. You give form to the invisible. It's like holding a mirror up to your mind. You begin to see patterns of thought, recurring fears, repeated justifications. Once you see them, you can question them. And when you question them, you weaken their hold. Awareness also thrives in stillness. In a world addicted to noise, stillness has become rare. And that's why most people live unconsciously. They move from one distraction to another, mistaking motion for progress. But stillness allows reflection, and reflection leads to direction. It's not about doing nothing. It's about being present enough to notice what you're doing and why. Without awareness, self-improvement turns into self-deception. You might read books, attend seminars, set goals. But if you don't know why you're doing it or how you're operating internally, you'll simply repeat the same mistakes in a different form. Progress without awareness is like running fast in the wrong direction. It looks productive, but it leads nowhere. Awareness is also humility. It's the willingness to admit that you don't see everything clearly, that your assumptions might be flawed. This humility opens the door to learning. When you believe you already know, you close yourself off from insight. But awareness says, I'm still observing, still growing. That's the mindset of mastery. And here's the paradox: awareness doesn't make life easier. It makes it clearer. When you become more aware, you start noticing the little lies you tell yourself, the wasted hours, the subtle fears. At first, that's uncomfortable. But it's necessary, because awareness isn't meant to flatter you. It's meant to free you. Jim Rohn used to remind us that progress begins the day you take responsibility for where you are. Awareness is that day. It's the awakening of self-accountability. It's the moment you stop blaming and start observing. You begin to understand that your external results are just a reflection of your internal patterns. So before you can conquer the enemies of progress, you must first recognize them. Awareness makes the invisible visible. It's your defense, your guide, your compass. Without it, success becomes accidental. With it, success becomes inevitable. Awareness is the beginning of all progress, the light that reveals the path, the mirror that tells the truth, and the wisdom that turns life from reaction to creation. Purpose. That's the ultimate defense against all the enemies of progress. It's the fire that burns through indifference, the anchor that steadies you through doubt, the courage that conquers fear, the discipline that silences excuses, and the energy that defeats laziness. Without purpose, even the strongest willpower eventually fades. But with it, ordinary people do extraordinary things. Jim Rohn often said, reasons come first, answers come second. What he meant was simple. Once your why is powerful enough, the how takes care of itself. Most people drift not because they lack intelligence or opportunity, but because they lack purpose. They wake up, go to work, pay the bills, and repeat the cycle, but they're not moving toward anything meaningful. Progress without purpose feels hollow. It's like running fast on a treadmill, a lot of motion, but no direction. Purpose gives progress its meaning, its momentum, its soul. Purpose begins with understanding yourself, your values, your gifts, your hunger. What do you care about deeply enough to endure pain for? Because make no mistake, growth is uncomfortable. Every real transformation demands sacrifice. The only thing that makes sacrifice bearable is meaning. That's why people with a strong sense of purpose don't need constant motivation. They don't need to be pushed. They're pulled forward by something bigger than comfort, bigger than fear. Jim Rohn used to challenge people to make a list of reasons. Reasons to change, reasons to improve, reasons to win. If you have enough reasons, he said, you can do the most incredible things. Reasons ignite purpose, and purpose ignites progress. Because when you know why you're doing something, every obstacle becomes a test, not a tragedy. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this teaching me? There's a philosophical depth to purpose that's worth understanding. Purpose transforms suffering. It gives meaning to struggle. Without purpose, pain feels pointless. and that's when people quit. But when your effort serves something larger than yourself, when it's connected to contribution, legacy, or love, pain becomes part of the process. It's no longer something to avoid, it's something to endure proudly. Because purpose doesn't remove the struggle, it redeems it. Many people wait for purpose to appear like a lightning bolt, as if one day they'll suddenly discover it. But purpose isn't found, it's built. It's created through small acts of intention, through choosing to make meaning out of your circumstances. It begins when you decide that your life, your work, your growth matters. Purpose grows in the soil of responsibility. It's born the moment you stop asking, "What do I want from life?" and start asking, "What does life want from me?" When you live with purpose, discipline becomes easier. You no longer see it as punishment, you see it as preparation. You begin to align your habits with your mission. Every hour has meaning because every effort moves you closer to something you believe in. That's why people with purpose radiate energy. Not because they're never tired, but because their exhaustion has direction. Purpose also clarifies decisions. When you know your why, saying no becomes easy. You stop chasing every distraction, every shiny object. You stop wasting time trying to please everyone. Purpose gives you focus, and focus gives you freedom. You learn to invest your time, not spend it. You begin to live deliberately, not accidentally. Rohn taught that purpose isn't only personal, it's relational. It's about contribution. We get paid for bringing value to the marketplace, he said, but we get fulfillment from bringing value to people. Success without service feels empty. Real fulfillment comes from knowing that your growth benefits others, that your progress ripples outward. Purpose turns success into significance. There's also a spiritual dimension to purpose. It connects you to something eternal. Call it faith, destiny, or meaning. It reminds you that your life isn't random, that every struggle and success is part of a greater design. That perspective creates resilience. Because when you believe your journey has meaning, you stop fearing temporary setbacks. You start trusting the process. But purpose requires renewal. It's not a one-time revelation, it's a daily decision. You must revisit it, refine it, reignite it. Ask yourself often, am I still aligned with what matters most? Am I living in a way that honors my values, my potential, my vision? Purpose can evolve as you evolve. What drives you today might deepen tomorrow. The key is to stay conscious, to keep that inner fire lit. The enemies of progress, indifference, doubt, fear, excuses, laziness, all lose their power in the presence of purpose. Indifference fades because purpose makes you care again. Doubt weakens because purpose gives you certainty. Fear dissolves because purpose makes the risk worth it. Excuses disappear because purpose demands accountability. Laziness dies because purpose fuels energy. And that's why Jim Rohn called purpose the master reason. When your reason is strong, your energy is strong. When your energy is strong, your results are inevitable. Life stops being a series of random events and becomes a deliberate journey. So if you feel stuck, lost, or uninspired, don't chase motivation, chase meaning. Find your reason and let it drive you. Purpose is not a luxury reserved for the few, it's a responsibility for the aware. Because in the end, progress isn't about